शक्ति बनी माँ लोकनाथ की नया जुगंतर लाई। मिटाने को अज्ञान अंधेरे सत्य की ज्वाला आई। शक्ति बनी माँ लोकनाथ की नया जुगंतर लाई। झर 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 बरसे सुधा शक्ति शांति आनंद। झर 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 बरसे सुधा शक्ति शांति आनंद। नमो नमः अरविंद, 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 नमो नमः अरविंद।
Namaste, my dear brothers and sisters, boys and girls. The love and blessings of the Mother and Sri Aurobindo to all of you from Sri Aurobindo Ashram, Delhi branch. In this beautiful devotional song that you heard in the melodious voice of Dr. Mithu Pal, you heard a tribute to Sri Aurobindo and the Mother. Paying respects to the Gurus, she talked about both of them one by one. First about Sri Aurobindo, who came to this world with the light of transformation, the light of that knowledge brought to earth, which would link earth with heaven, so that heaven can be brought down on earth. What it means is that the level of the human race on this planet would rise as a result of what he brought to the earth to a level which would transform human nature, and that would require transformation of all parts of the being. So he brought that light, that knowledge, which was an enabling force for working out that transformation, and the Mother became his Shakti, his self-aware force that would translate that light into a practical shape, give it a practical shape that would actually start working out that transformation. So it was that ideal combination, and two bodies were needed for that. One body could not have done it, and that's why two bodies but one consciousness was here on this earth not too long ago to usher in a new world order, an order in which the human nature itself would change for the better, and as a result the world would change, and the final result of that would be that the world would no longer be a place full of misery and suffering as it has been for thousands of years. Just because it had been so for thousands of years does not mean that it has always got to be so. It was with that assurance and that confidence that Sri Aurobindo and the Mother came here and gave us the certitude that it will happen, and human beings being equipped with that urge to transform and also the capacity to do so could become collaborators in this process of evolution and collaborate with nature to accelerate that process of transformation. So that is essentially what the purpose of their being here on this planet in the physical was for. Now we go to today's session. After talking about some of the major schools of yoga and concluding with the all-in-one yoga, that is integral yoga, we turn to the techniques. And in the last session we talked about the asanas, and as it often happens, I forgot to sort of make that point probably as effectively as I should have done, that all movements in these asanas are not only gentle, harmonious, and graceful, they are also conscious. And further, that the slow pace of these movements ensures that it will be so. So there's no place for jerky movements in these asanas. If one were to sort of demonstrate the type of stretches that we have in these yogic practices, the asanas, through this rubber band, there are two ways to stretch it. We are stretching the body in these asanas. One is this. But that is not the way it should be done in the asanas. The asanas is a slow, steady pace of reaching a stretch, and then when you are in the final position, not only holding it there, but meditating on the divine, which would make this position effortless. And then gradually, after the period of holding it is over, you again come back slowly to the initial position. So that is the way the asanas go. You are conscious throughout of what you are doing. Okay. Today we turn to the next well-known technique, and that is the pranayamas, or the breathing practices. And for that, once again, I'll turn to the slides. My pranams to the Gurus, the Mother and Sri Aurobindo, for their infinite grace. The YES program is a part of the celebrations of the 150th birth anniversary of Sri Aurobindo and the 75th anniversary of India's independence. Today, in this series on the techniques of yoga, we'll be talking about pranayama. To establish the background, the creation of the material universe was the result of the Supreme Consciousness, the Divine, that knew everything and could do everything, deciding one day to manifest as the material universe. And since it could do everything, one of the things that it could do was to become matter. Of course, in the process of becoming matter or becoming visible in the form of matter, it did not disappear. It still continued to be there. It's something like this. You suppose a singer knows 1,000 songs, and one day she decides to bring forth, that is, bring out of herself, make public by singing one of those songs. The singer still continues to be there. The whole repository of 1,000 songs also continues to be with there, and yet she has made herself visible to the world through that one song that she sang. So the divine also in that way was also, you might say, capable of, because it could do everything, it was capable of singing not 1,000, perhaps an infinite number of songs. And one day it decided to bring forth one of them, and that was to manifest as matter. And when it did that, you can understand what a gross act of self-limitation it was. The one that knew everything and could do everything became visible in a form that apparently knew nothing and could do nothing. So it was a great fall. We can call it an involution. But then the next step in this game or leela that the divine decided to play was to manifest a little more of what it could do, or rather its consciousness. Consciousness is, is essentially about knowing and doing. So manifest a little more of that knowing and doing, and that was the creation of life. Now that was just a little fraction of unfolding of the consciousness of the Supreme, which was hidden in matter, but even this little bit of unfolding was a big leap. So first there was a great fall, and then what was a big leap, because now suddenly this dead piece of matter could carry out with great precision millions of chemical reactions which we call life. Now, what did it? What converted that matter into a living creature? That was prana. That is the life force. So the divine manifested itself in the form of that life force, and that is what converted matter into living things. Now, what is life? What did prana really do? It converted matter into a self-propelled machine, which means that this machine, without being prompted, could now go on ticking and continue with a process that we identify as life. It did not require any wires, cables, remote control, nothing. On its own, it could carry out all that was needed to distinguish it from matter to be called a living being. And like everything active and dynamic, it needed energy, and therefore it took energy from the environment and then gave back something. So through a process of give and take, this machine could continue doing what it was designed to do. The energy it took from the environment used that energy for processes that started running in autopilot mode. It could just go on ticking, but then as a result, it also created some byproducts which we may call waste, and that it gave. But then it was not purely a waste, because there were two sets of living creatures created. The waste for one became food for the other. So the creatures that we call plants, they made use of the energy from the sun directly, converted it into food that they could use, and while using that food, the so-called waste that they produced was oxygen, which in turn could be used by animals for tapping that energy which they got from plants in the form of food, and the waste carbon dioxide that they produced could then be used by the plants for manufacturing their food, along with, of course, the energy that they got from the sun. So the ultimate source of this energy which these living creatures were used was actually the sun, and there was sort of a recycling setup on this planet which made it possible for both plants and animals to live and carry on that process that we call life. So prana is in a way an energy which is tapped from the sun, but it is intelligent energy. But then what is this intelligence? That we'll see in a minute. But in fact, even the intelligence that it manifested was only a small part of the intelligence that was packed into it, because it's a manifestation of the divine which has infinite intelligence. So prana was manifesting only a small part of it. The rest was kept under wraps. But then what was kept under wraps can also be unearthed, and that is what the process of yoga does, which means you can make prana actually manifest a little more of its intelligence than it normally does in most of us. Now let's see what prana actually does, even in ordinary persons like you and me. It lends its intelligence to chemicals. A molecule of adrenaline or insulin in the body is quite different from the same molecule in a test tube, because now it is not just behaving like that chemical, but it has now become a part of an orchestra in which there is a large number of processes going on in the body, and depending upon what is in the best interests of that living creature, this molecule becomes available in less quantity or greater quantity. It becomes more effective or less effective. All these variations are possible because of the molecule being not just like any ordinary chemical, a piece of matter which seems to know nothing and can do nothing. This seems to be charged with some mysterious power which makes it possible to behave more intelligently than it does purely as a chemical in a test tube. So in a way, it's an intelligent molecule. Further, what prana does is to channelize the consciousness of the Supreme through matter. Matter which constitutes our nervous system, particularly the brain. So through that, this prana can channelize this consciousness. It's not the brain that is the generator of consciousness. It only channelizes a part of the universal consciousness. And that becomes possible because of prana. Because the brain is still there in a dead body, but this brain is not able to do that because the prana has disappeared. So prana becomes an enabling force even for manifesting the consciousness which we identify with the brain. Then it regulates the functions to meet challenges, because a living creature is a dynamic system, and the price paid for any dynamism is that you do not have constancy, you have change. So the body is continuously using oxygen and food products, and therefore it needs a fresh supply of these food products and oxygen, and then the supply may not be always available in the same amount. Immediately after a meal we have plenty of food available, but between meals or during fasting we have no food available for a long time. The person may have enough of oxygen in the atmosphere, or the person may go to a high altitude where very little oxygen is available. Now these are all challenges. These challenges can be from outside, the challenges can be from within the body, but then the prana is equipped to make these organs of the body, which are charged with that life force, act in a manner that the activity of these organs can be stepped up or stepped down. They can work more briskly or slow down deliberately in order to meet these challenges properly, so that the individual cells of the body still have all those conditions available which can make them function in the best possible way. So it's able to regulate the functions, and that is where the intelligence hidden in this prana comes out. Because all these organs will not be able to do it unless the prana was there, because the organs are all there even in a dead body, but that is not able to do that, and that is why it cannot live. But it is the prana which makes it possible, this subtle force which is hardly visible, which makes it possible for these organs to regulate the functions of the body, so that the conditions are always appropriate for the processes of life to continue. No matter how efficient a machine is, once in a while it will be damaged, it will not be able to work as well as it does. Prana also provides the possibilities of the various parts of the body act in such a way that if there is a damage or if the machine breaks down, it can repair it back to normal. So all this prana can do, even in spite of manifesting only a small tiny fraction of that supreme consciousness, not even manifesting all the intelligence that is packed in this prana itself. Not only prana does that, it also creates the urge to live. Earlier we were talking about the capacity to live. All this gives it the capacity to live, but then apart from the capacity, it also creates an urge to live. This urge is there in a single-celled creature like an amoeba. It is this urge which makes this creature move towards food and move away from anything which can do it harm. This urge is there in a plant, which makes the plant spread out its roots far and wide to reach places where enough of water and other nutrients are available, and it is the same urge to live which makes the plant grow in a direction which is towards the sun and away from darkness, so that it can manufacture its food. And it is there in animals, which makes again the animal capable of not only looking for food but also feel like looking for food, because in higher animals this urge to live has been coupled with feelings. If the animal does not get enough food, it becomes miserable, and when it gets food it is happy, and therefore when it is hungry, it knows that this misery that I am experiencing because of hunger will go when I find food. Not only that, instead of this misery, I'll feel happy. So by coupling misery with hunger and pleasure with food, nature has made sure that, rather prana has made sure that the animal will look for food and eat, make that effort. Not only prana creates the possibility to live and the urge to live, it also creates the urge to propagate. Because now, no matter how well a machine is made, because of the limitations of matter which are inbuilt into it, this machine will not be able to live forever, this process will not continue forever. But then before it leaves this earth, it leaves behind its kind. So that has also been ensured so that the creatures will continue to live, the planet will continue to be inhabited by a large variety of living beings. So it has created also the urge to propagate, and as in case of food, in higher animals this urge has also been coupled with feelings which ensures that the animal will look for a mate. When it doesn't find a mate, it is miserable. When it finds the mate, it is happy. So to escape that misery and to find that pleasure, the animal looks for a mate, and that's how it continues to propagate. So just see what prana does. It converts a lump of clay which can apparently do nothing into a self-propelled machine that is without anything else, any other intervention. On its own, it is able to continue with the processes that we identify as life for very long periods of time. Not only it can do so, it wants to do so because it is self-motivated to continue that process of life. It wants to live. And further, if anything goes wrong with it, because of challenges from outside or within, it can regulate the processes of life in such a way, stepping up some process and stepping down some process, so that the conditions for life are preserved. And if occasionally there is a breakdown, it can heal itself back to normalcy. And before leaving this planet, by and large, it also ensures that it will leave behind its kind. So it's a self-perpetuating machine. So just look at the wonderful machine that has been created out of this lump of clay just by the entry of prana. It has become self-propelled, self-motivated, self-regulating, self-healing, and self-perpetuating. Now all these processes continue without the intervention of willpower. Willpower is not needed by and large for what prana does. But prana is required for the willpower to manifest, because the willpower manifests through our nervous system, and unless that nervous system is animated by this prana, the nervous system will not be able to manifest that willpower. Prana evolved before the mind, and now it enables the mind to function the way it does. So in a way, prana is the bridge between matter and mind. Now, willpower ordinarily cannot fully control what prana does. To some extent it can, and that is what explains the mind-body relationship, because we are able to influence the functions of the body by using our willpower, but then cannot fully control. But it can control the functions of the body much more if this willpower aligns itself with the power that manifests as prana. Because after all, the prana is also a manifestation of the divine. It is the divine that manifested as this prana or life force which animated dead matter. Now if this willpower is able to align itself with that power, then the capacity of the willpower increases, because the willpower has also been is also a manifestation of the divine. Willpower is a part of the mind. So like the life force, the mind is also a manifestation of the divine. So the mind also has limitations, and that is why it cannot control prana fully. But then if it moves in the direction which makes it more and more one with that higher power, that is what the process of yoga is about. That is, we are trying to take different parts of the being towards the creator, towards the one that has manifested as this limited, flawed instrument. The body and the mind are basically flawed instruments, both animated by prana, which makes them do what they do. But then these instruments are flawed and have limited abilities. But then, being manifestations of the divine, their potential is unlimited, and to manifest that unlimited potential, or a greater fraction of what is hidden, to manifest a greater fraction of it, we again need the prana itself to manifest more of what it can do. So if the willpower aligns itself with that higher power, we are doing that in yoga. We are making this different parts of the being become more aligned to that higher power, be more and more in tune with it, so that their potential is manifested to a greater extent. So if this willpower aligns itself with that higher power, that which manifests as prana and willpower, then this willpower itself will be able to control prana, because if both are now able to manifest more, it is the higher evolved principle which came later which will be able to control the principle which evolved earlier. So while prana is that enabling force, the willpower did evolve after prana evolved, because creatures like say primitive creatures do not have that willpower. They work in autopilot mode, but the amoeba doesn't seem to have a will. Lower creatures do not have a will. One can't be sure whether even plants have a will. They are doing what is necessary to live, but necessarily not using their willpower to control what they are doing. So it's only the higher animals which have that willpower. It's a principle which evolved much later. And therefore, if this willpower is enabled to do more, and for that, again, a greater manifestation of the prana is important. So if the willpower can manifest more of what it can do, it will be able to control the principle which evolved earlier. It can control prana, which means that it will be able to have some influence over the functions over which we ordinarily do not have an influence. And that is why a yogi may be able to control prana, and through that control those functions of the body which are normally outside the control of willpower. Now these functions of the body which are outside the control of willpower is what we call autonomic functions. So the yogi can control autonomic functions because now his willpower is in tune with that higher power which has no limitations, and therefore now it can use the same prana, have control over those functions which are normally working in autopilot mode under the influence of prana. They can be controlled by willpower. So a yogi may be therefore able to use willpower to control prana. And pranayama literally means controlling the prana. Actually, it's not really controlling. It's a little more subtle than controlling. It's just that prana, by being in tune with that higher power, and the willpower being in tune with that higher power, now both are able to do what they could not do earlier. So the willpower can now control prana, or sort of enable prana to do more, and the prana can now do more than what it did earlier because of that enabling. So prana is acting as that bridge. Both are able to manifest more, and therefore the willpower is able to make the prana do more. That's why control in those single inverted commas. So it's conscious control of prana is what we call pranayama. One might say, why we want to control prana? Why interfere with the natural order? If we are constituted in such a way that willpower will not be able to influence a large number of functions in the body, why interfere with them? Because this absence of the control of willpower over many functions in the body itself has some use. For example, just imagine if we had to control our heartbeat with our willpower, if we forget to beat the heart for a minute because we are occupied with something else, what would happen? So it's nice that it is going on its own without the necessity of our being able to beat our hearts or breathe. Breathing is continuing on its own, the heart is continuing to beat on its own. In a way, it serves an important purpose. That's what keeps us alive. Otherwise, we'll have to remember to do all these things. Now, why do we want to interfere with that natural order? The yogi actually is not wanting to interfere with that natural order. That is not the purpose of yoga. The purpose of yoga is to manifest more of the divinity so that the human being becomes a better human being. That is the purpose of yoga. But then, while on that journey, because all parts of the being are now more in tune with that higher power, their capacities increase. So it's a byproduct. Increase in the capacity of prana, or increase in the capacity of the body to do something, or increase in the capacity of the mind to do something is a byproduct of yoga. The objective of yoga is not to control one thing or the other. But that capacity is acquired as a byproduct because now all these parts of the being are now able to do much more than they could earlier. Since the divine has no limitations, the limitations of these parts of the being also start disappearing. So as a result of this so-called control that a yogi acquires, what all can this yogi do? He can direct prana to a particular part of the body intentionally, so that that part of the body can be influenced, its activity can be stepped up or down, and that is how a yogi may be able to control the heart rate or digestion. And there are documented studies which show that a yogi could at least stop his heart for a long enough duration, which would have otherwise occupied 16 beats of the heart. That is a documented study, but probably they can do a lot more. Or the other day we were talking about yogis being able to generate heat in the body, so that the wet sheet put over their body dries up within a few minutes, even in the Himalayas where the temperatures in the surroundings are below freezing. So even in that environment, they can generate enough heat to stay with very little clothing, and if you cover them with a bed sheet, then the sheet dries up within a few minutes. There have been yogis who have been able to influence one side of the body and not the other. So the right side becomes warm and the left side remains cold. That also they can do. So, they can influence a lot of these functions like the heart rate and the temperature and digestion and so on. By directing the prana to a particular part of the body, they can repair that part of the body or heal it. And by doing so, by accelerating and making the process of self-healing more efficient, they can prolong life. They can come out of an illness. But then the same control over the prana also enables them to terminate life, make prana leave the body, so that this prana, which keeps the soul and the body together, no longer is able to live. The soul departs from the body, the prana departs from the body, and if the prana departs, the soul departs, and the dead body is left behind. So they can also terminate life, what we call Ichha Mrityu. Now, at what point a yogi will use this capacity to prolong life, and at what point he'll choose to terminate it, that only the yogi knows. But this is what made Sri Aurobindo say, when he was about to leave the body, when somebody told him, why don't you use your yogic powers to heal yourself, to come out of this illness? He just said in a few simple words, you will not understand. Because the yogi knows best when he has done what he had to do in this life through this bodily instrument, and when it is time to leave. So that is what the yoga does. It creates the capacity to prolong life and also to terminate life. So to use the master's words, coming from the synthesis of yoga, as the consciousness becomes more subtle by the practice of yoga, so it's moving from gross to subtle. The body is the most gross, and as human beings are ordinarily constituted, prana is more subtle than the body and the mind is more subtle than prana. But then the yogi is manifesting still more subtle levels of consciousness, which are, you might say, higher than the mind, or in traditional terminology, which belong to the realm of the Vijnanamaya Kosha and the Anandamaya Kosha. So those are the more subtle levels of consciousness which are ordinarily not manifest, but the yogi starts manifesting them. So as the consciousness becomes more subtle by the practice of yoga, we can come to be aware of the sea of pranic Shakti around us. The person becomes aware of this. It's no longer a hypothesis for him. He can see that the limitations of his body or the boundary of his body is not his true boundary. He has a subtle sheath around that, which is the Pranic Sheath. You might have seen those diagrams in which you have a human being as we normally see him, and then around him there is another sheath, which is the Pranic Sheath, around that another one, which is the sheath of the Vijnanamaya Kosha, Manomaya Kosha, and then the Anandamaya Kosha, and so on. So those 5 sheaths. So the Pranic Sheath, now sometimes the question is asked that if the prana is more subtle than the body, then where is it? Is it deeper than the body, or does it extend outside the body? It is deeper than the body in a way. All subtle layers are deeper than the body, but then because they are subtle, they do not remain confined to the body. And that's how they can be also seen by the yogi around. And the more subtle it is, the more it spreads, and that's how the subtler sheets keep extending out till the final Anandamaya Kosha is infinite. But then these divisions are artificial. They are all manifestations of the divine, and that is why even the Pranic Sheath may not look exactly like it does in pictures. As Sri Aurobindo says, to the yogi, this Pranic Shakti around him is also like a vast sea. So as this consciousness becomes more subtle, so the subtle levels are deeper, but then they diffuse out also more because they cannot be held by a boundary. So they tend to diffuse more. So as the consciousness becomes more subtle by the practice of yoga, we can come to be aware of the sea of pranic Shakti around us. Not only that, the person acquires the capacity to direct it in the way he wants, because now it is in direct alignment, it's well tuned with that higher power which has created all these, which has manifested as all these things, body, the prana and the mind and so on. So the one which has manifested in these forms, he is in tune with that, and therefore it can make greater use of these. He can bring out their full potential, make a lower principle work under the influence of a higher principle. So it can make prana work under the influence of the mind, which is a higher principle, because both are now in tune with the that higher power. So that's how he can make this prana act at will in a particular direction to accomplish a certain particular type of task. So he can feel this pranic Shakti all around him and can direct and act this pranic Shakti, direct and act upon this pranic Shakti instantly and immediately by using his willpower. Now, returning to more mundane levels, moving a little away from these levels which only advanced and accomplished yogis are able to realize. For the ordinary person, it is the breathing which becomes the visible manifestation of prana. The rest of the manifestations remain completely unknown and unseen to us. So breathing is a visible manifestation of prana. It does not require the control of willpower, but at the same time it can be controlled by willpower. This is one of those functions which can be controlled by one willpower. We can increase or decrease our rate of breathing. We can increase or decrease our depth of breathing. We can make inspiration longer than expiration, expiration longer than inspiration. All these things we can do. So we can play with the pattern of breathing as we like. So it can be controlled by willpower. Although it is not normally we do not use willpower to control it. We keep breathing without being conscious of it, which is actually good. It doesn't distract us. We don't have to remember to breathe. Breathing is the only function of prana that can even ordinarily be controlled by willpower. In fact, this is the only function which can be ordinarily. Extraordinary situations, every function can be controlled, but this is the only function of prana which can be ordinarily controlled by willpower, and that is why breathing can serve as the gateway to develop extraordinary control over other pranic functions. So that is the place where pranayama, as we ordinarily understand it, comes in. But before we go to the pranayama practices, let's see what are some of the fundamental differences between the ordinarily or the usual way we breathe and ideal breathing, which is one of the things that happens as a result of practicing pranayamas. We move from usual breathing towards ideal breathing. Usually we breathe rather fast, 15 to 20 times a minute. Ideal breathing should be slower than that, maybe around 10 times a minute. Usual breathing is shallow, whereas ideal breathing is deep. Now you can see that fast and shallow can give us the same sort of ventilation, that is air moving in and out, as slow and deep breathing. It's something like walking. If you take small steps but take fast steps, you'll cover the same distance as if you take bigger steps but walk slowly. So the choice is yours. You can do that. Say for example, if each time we breathe in half a liter of air, breathe in and out half a liter of air, and do it say 15 times or 20 times, say 20 times half a liter, it will be 10 liters per minute. But if we start breathing at the rate of 10 times a minute, but we breathe in not half a liter but 1 liter, again it will be 10 liters of air that will be moving in a minute. But then why is slow and deep breathing better than fast and shallow breathing? The reason is that the function of breathing is not to move in and out a certain amount of air, but to actually deliver it to the body. And only that part of the air is useful in delivering oxygen to the body which is in the lungs, not the air which is in the airways. Because see, when we breathe in, some of the air will stay in the airways, that is the tubes, which go up to the lungs, and that will not participate in gas exchange. What will participate in gas exchange is only what is within the lungs. So if we breathe in more frequently, then we are wasting that effort which is required for moving the air but stays only in the airways, which it does not participate in gas exchange. We are repeating that effort more number of times a minute. Whereas when we breathe slowly, we are wasting that effort less number of times per minute. And the result is that the same amount of air moved in and out becomes more effective, because it is a larger fraction of that air moved in and out will participate in gas exchange if it is the result of slow but deep breathing, because we are not wasting that effort in just moving it in and out through those tubes. We'll get into it again in greater detail in another module when we talk about the functions of the body, but tried to give the basic principle that fast and shallow breathing is not as efficient as slow and deep breathing. With less effort, you can get the same amount of gas exchange, same amount of delivery of oxygen to the body through slow and deep breathing than with fast and shallow breathing. Saves the effort of breathing, the work of breathing. Or to put it another way, if we use the same amount of effort, we can get more oxygen into the body if we breathe slowly and deeply. So our reserve goes up. You can have a greater reserve capacity to breathe. Another difference is that the usual breathing is predominantly chest breathing, whereas ideal breathing is predominantly abdominal breathing. And abdominal breathing is more efficient again, because that is the result of the diaphragm, that is the partition between the chest and the abdomen, moving up and down. Now that is a big muscle, a strong muscle, diaphragm, and therefore a little movement up and down increases the capacity of the chest much more efficiently than happens in chest breathing as a result of the movement of the ribs, because the ribs moving up and down takes quite a bit of effort but does not increase the capacity of the chest in a commensurate manner. With much less effort, we can increase the capacity of the chest to the same extent by just moving the partition between the chest and the abdomen up and down, and that is what abdominal breathing is about. And because that partition goes down every time we breathe, the capacity of the chest increases. But because that partition, now the diaphragm is now pressing on the stomach and intestines, the stomach and the intestines bulge out, and that is why the abdomen goes out when we breathe in. So ideal breathing is slow, deep and abdominal. So you'll see in most of the pranayamas that is one of the important things that happens. We move from shallow and fast breathing towards slow and deep breathing, and from chest breathing to abdominal breathing. And one way to practice is a simple or sahaj pranayama, the simplest of them all, in which you are just practicing this. That is breathing in and out slowly, and in such a way that we spend more time on breathing out than on breathing in. Now, why breathing out? We emphasize in most of the pranayamas, take more time to breathe out than to breathe in. That is because why we do that is because one of the things that happens is that the functioning of the respiratory system and the heart are linked to each other. So every time we breathe in, the heart rate goes up, and when we breathe out, the heart rate goes down. This variation is much more pronounced in younger people, and but happens to some extent in everybody. So if you place your fingers on the pulse and just take a few deep breaths, you'll find that while you're breathing in, your pulse becomes faster, and when you are breathing out, becomes slower. So you can try that right now. You can try it anytime later also during the day. So you find that while breathing in, the heart rate goes up, while breathing out, it goes down. And therefore, if more time is spent on breathing out than on breathing in, over a period of 1 minute, the predominant effect on the heart rate will be that of breathing out, because you're spending more time on breathing out. So on the whole, the overall heart rate per minute will come down. You're also bringing down the rate of breathing so the breathing rate is coming down, the heart rate is coming down, because we are breathing slow and deep and spending more time on breathing out than on breathing in. Now, how is that helpful? Bringing down this rate of breathing, bringing down the heart rate. How does that help? In the body we have a mind-body relationship. When we are angry and agitated, we breathe fast and the heart rate also becomes faster. When we are at peace, we breathe slowly and the heart rate also comes down. It works also the other way around. If we start breathing slowly and if the heart rate comes down, we start feeling at peace. So peace leads to slow breathing and a lower heart rate. The slower breathing and bringing the heart rate down makes us feel peaceful. So in pranayama, we are doing both these things. We are slowing down the rate of breathing, and we are also bringing down the heart rate by spending more time on breathing out than on breathing in. And that is how we feel more at peace. So even the Sahaj Pranayama makes you feel at peace because of that. So you can try it for a few minutes, for a minute or so. What I'll do is I'll give you a cue. After every 4 seconds, I will spend 4 times on breathing in and about 6 seconds on breathing out. So that becomes 10 seconds. So 10 seconds for one breathing cycle will give you 6 times of breathing per minute. Okay, 60 seconds, you'll breathe 6 times, spending 10 seconds on each cycle, and out of those 10 seconds, 4 seconds for breathing in and 6 seconds for breathing out. You'll see the effect. Inhale, exhale, inhale, exhale, inhale, exhale, inhale, exhale, inhale, exhale, inhale, exhale. So that was 1 minute. We breathed together 10 times during this 1 minute, and you might have observed feeling more peaceful because it is considerably slower than the rate at which we normally breathe, and there was a calculated effort at spending more time on breathing out than on breathing in. Okay, so this is Sahaj or simple pranayama. Then full yogic breathing, which we have been doing during the sessions during the last few days. Here, we not only spend more time on breathing out than on breathing in, we also breathe deeply. So it is truly slow and deep breathing, the deepest possible. And normally we place one hand on the chest, one on the abdomen. While breathing in, we move from the abdomen up towards the shoulders. And while doing so, we count from 1 to 5 mentally. And as we move from the abdomen to the chest while breathing in, we guard the abdomen, that is, resist the tendency of the abdomen to go in again. While breathing out, the order is reversed. We move down from the shoulders towards the abdomen, and breathing out is passive and slow. We count from 10 to 1, and it's only towards the end of breathing out that it becomes active as we are squeezing in a little more air by taking the abdomen in. Sometimes, some places it's not told that you keep one hand on the chest, one on the abdomen, but rather stay in what is called Brahma Mudra, hands in your lap in a particular way. So either way it's okay, but one of the advantages which a yoga teacher has, and since we are trying to equip you towards becoming yoga teachers, is that if you have one hand on the chest and one on the abdomen, you can quietly keep pressing your fingers after each breath. So you know that how many times you have already made them breathe. So they may be doing it at their own pace, but at least you know how long it has been going on. And if you make it go on, say, till 5 or 10, whatever, depending on the time available, you know when to tell them to stop after the next cycle of breathing. So that way, you help. Helps you in timing your practice better, giving only a certain amount of time that you have available for a particular practice. So you can use your fingers while they are on the chest and the abdomen to keep a count of the number of breaths. That's another advantage. So that is full yogic breathing. We'll not do it because we have been doing it in the last few days anyway. Then the alternate nostril breathing, or Anulom Vilom Pranayam, or Nadi Shuddhi Pranayam. And again, we have been practicing it, adopting Nasika Mudra, taking it towards the nose. And we start with breathing out through the left nostril. Naturally, for that, we'll have to block the right nostril. So we start with blocking the right, breathing out through the left, in through the left, block the left, out through the right, in through the right, block the right, out through the left, and so on. It goes on. So the change of nostril comes after each inhalation. And we make a conscious effort to keep the neck straight while doing this. Maintain a slow and uniform breathing, neither too shallow nor too deep, but slow, uniform, spending more time on breathing out than on breathing in, and trying to have as much of abdominal rather than chest breathing as possible. So all these things we keep in mind during alternate nostril breathing also. Now this is a helpful pranayam, so useful that's also called the king of pranayamas. It balances the autonomic nervous system, but sometimes we want to create a deliberate imbalance in the nervous system for a short period. So when you want to particularly activate the sympathetic nervous system, then it's right nostril breathing. And right nostril breathing can be again in two ways. One is what is called Surya Bhedan Pranayam, and the other is Surya Anulom Vilom Pranayam. Now, the simple way to remember is Surya Bhedan means there's a difference. Bhed means a difference. Surya is sun. Sun is warm, it warms us. It activates us. So sympathetic also activates us. And Bhedan is difference. So what is the difference? Difference is between the nostril through which you inhale and exhale. Those nostrils are different. And for activation, we have to breathe in through the right nostril. So it means every time we are breathing in through the right nostril. But since the nostril of breathing in is different from the breathing out nostril, breathe in through the right, breathe out through the left. Again, breathe in through the right, breathe out through the left. Breathe in through the right, breathe out through the left. So every time it is inhale through the right, exhale through the left. And that's what is called Surya Bhedan Pranayam. In Surya Anulom Vilom, we don't alternate. Breathe in through the right, breathe out through the right. So we keep the left permanently blocked. In through the right, out through the right, in through the right, out through the right. So that's Surya. Chandra is the opposite. There, Chandra Bhedan. Breathe in through the left, out through the right. Chandra Anulom Vilom. Breathe in through the left, breathe out through the left. When do we want to create this imbalance deliberately for a short period? In the autonomic nervous system, when we want to say gain weight or lose weight. That's one of the situations. So to lose weight, the Surya type of pranayam, and to gain weight, the Chandra type of pranayam. And the prescription is 27 cycles of these pranayamas at a time, 4 times a day. Not that by itself that will be enough to gain weight or lose weight, but it can contribute, it can help towards that end. And as we were discussing the other day, it can also help you feel warm when it's very cold outside, you are inadequately clothed, you can use the right nostril breathing to feel warmer. So that is alternate nostril breathing. Then Kapalabhati, or shine on the head, literally. Why is it called shine on the head? Because if you continue for long enough, you feel a little light in the head, you feel as if all the congestion in the head is gone, the head has become clean, That's why it's sometimes also classified as a cleansing technique. So it's a cleansing technique, it makes the head clear, makes the head shine. One physiological explanation why this could be happening is because we are breathing out more oxygen than is being produced. Sorry, breathing out more carbon dioxide than is being produced. So the result is that the carbon dioxide levels in the body fall. Now carbon dioxide is required for keeping the blood flow to the brain constant. That is the main regulator of the blood flow to the brain. Oxygen, dilates the blood vessels, that is, makes them wider so that the blood can continue flowing. And because the brain is continuously producing carbon dioxide, like all other organs, it is using oxygen, producing carbon dioxide. So the activity itself regulates the blood flow. The more active a part of the body is, the more oxygen it consumes and more carbon dioxide it produces. So if the carbon dioxide itself increases the blood flow by making the blood vessels wider, it will increase the blood flow when the organ is more active. So it's we're talking about prana regulating the bodily functions. So this is one very intelligent and so seemingly simple way of regulating the blood flow to an organ. The more active it is, the more carbon dioxide it produces. The more carbon dioxide it produces, the wider the blood vessels become. Now here we are washing out carbon dioxide from the body. We are throwing out of the body more carbon dioxide than is being produced. The result is that the blood flow will decrease, and this will happen at the place where this is the predominant mechanism of blood regulation. In the other organs there are multiple mechanisms, but in the brain there is essentially one mechanism for regulating blood flow, and that is the carbon dioxide levels. So when the carbon dioxide levels fall, the blood vessels in the brain will actually constrict. The blood flow will fall, and when the blood flow falls, the person will first feel light, then if we continue the process he will be dizzy, and if we continue the process further he can faint. So that is why a person can faint if a person just goes on doing Kapalabhati for a long time continuously. And that is why we say don't do it continuously for a very long time. Safest period for a beginner is just about 20 seconds. After that, stop for a while, then you can do it again. That is also the reason why at the end of a round of Kapalabhati, the person may not feel like breathing. Because that is again an inbuilt regulatory function in the regulatory mechanism in the body. If carbon dioxide has been washed out, the person does not feel the capacity to breathe till the carbon dioxide levels have again built up. Then build-up of this carbon dioxide and fall in the oxygen levels, which will also happen if you stop breathing, will reach a breaking point. These two, opposing things, oxygen levels gradually falling and carbon dioxide levels gradually rising as a result of this breath holding, or rather stoppage of breathing, which occurs at the end of Kapalabhati. So this rise in the carbon dioxide levels, when as a result of the build-up, will stimulate the urge to breathe. So then you start breathing again. So that is what explains what is happening in Kapalabhati, and why we feel that clearing of the head, why we feel what has been called the shine on the head. Sometimes the question is asked whether Kapalabhati really is a Kriya or a Pranayama. A Kriya, is a cleansing technique. Pranayama is a breathing practice. What it is out of the two, that depends upon the rate. If we rate of this breathing during Kapalabhati is more than 50 breaths per minute, then it qualifies as a Kriya. Then it becomes a cleansing technique because it is washing out a lot of carbon dioxide because of this fast breathing. So that is what makes it a Kriya or a cleansing technique. Whereas if it is less than 10 breaths per minute, then it is Pranayama, because Pranayama actually properly speaking is always slow. Pranayama is slow breathing. Now you will say, how can we breathe so slowly in Kapalabhati? We can bring down this rate to this low level even in Kapalabhati by prolonging what is called Kumbhaka. Kumbhaka is the breath holding time. So you are breathing only, it's a rapid jerky exhalation, but then it's followed by a long period of no breathing at all. That is, Kumbhaka is prolonged. So that's how you can maintain a rate of less than 10 breaths per minute even in Kapalabhati, and then it becomes a Pranayama. So the same practice, depending upon the rate at which it is done, becomes a Pranayama. But the way it is commonly done and the way beginners should do is a Kriya. It's not properly speaking a Pranayama. Who should do the Pranayama and how it should be done? I don't do it myself, so I'm not really qualified to talk about it. But theoretically what I know is that this is something which one can go towards from the normal Kapalabhati towards this when it becomes a pranayama, slowly in steps under direct supervision of a teacher, because it can be dangerous. It has its, and that is why normally when we do pranayamas, we do them without kumbhaka, without any breath holding. Because with breath holding, it becomes an advanced practice which should not be done just by listening to somebody or reading a book. It should be done under direct supervision. So for all practical purposes, for us, the way we do Kapalabhati is it's a kriya. But we talk about it while doing pranayamas. We club it with those, but it's not really a pranayama. Now another question, what is the difference between Kapalabhati and Bhastrika? The major difference is that in Bhastrika, inhalation and exhalation are both active. In Kapalabhati, only the exhalation is active, inhalation is passive. We make an effort while breathing out, but breathing in, we don't make any effort. In Bhastrika, the effort is made both the times, and therefore the sound produced is like that of bellows. So it's the bellow-like sound. Bhastrika means bellows, which Iron Smith uses, So that's why it's called Bhastrika. Then there are cooling pranayamas, Sitali, Sitkari and Sadanta. Now these cooling pranayamas produce a cooling effect because we breathe in air through the mouth, and the air that we breathe in is cold, so that's why it creates that cooling effect. And it can be done in different ways, how to keep that mouth slightly open to be able to breathe in. So that is what makes it either Sitali or Sitkari or Sadanta. We can do it either by rolling the tongue, making it like the beak of a crow, or we can roll the tongue up and take it back so that you have a tube-like thing produced out of the tongue, which can do it, or one can just bring the teeth, upper and the lower teeth close together so that the mouth is slightly open and breathe in through the gap between the upper and the lower teeth. So one can take in air through this slightly open mouth, in which we can have any of these three arrangements, and then breathe out through the nose. So this is what creates that cooling effect. These cooling pranayamas may be useful in summers, but should not be done in winters, should not be done in damp weather, and so there are a few contraindications, but then one can do any of these. If the person can't create that beak or can't roll the tongue, then he can do Sadanta, and if the person doesn't have teeth, then he can't do even Sadanta. So if a person can't do any of these three, again there's not really too much to lose, but all the same it's good to know them. Bhramari is a relaxing pranayam, and we have been doing that every day. It's deep inhalation through the nose, followed by a nakara, a na sound while breathing out. Creates a sweet resonance in the head, and that's how it's again a relaxing pranayam. And we can further magnify this resonance, and maybe you'll find it more soothing if you magnify the resonance. If you place your hands, place the thumb rather, in the ear canal, or press the ear, so you can actually put it inside the ear canal, or press these little folds outside the ears so that the ear canal is a little blocked. Then this sound is magnified, the resonance may feel sweeter, but then at the same time bringing the hand here itself is an effort, and if you want to be totally relaxed, you may not like to bring the hands up there and just keep the hands in a meditative pose. So you can do it either way, either keeping the hands in a meditative pose or bringing the hands up and blocking the ear. Then Ujjayi Pranayam, which we have not been doing, but again pretty popular pranayam, and particularly we are talking about it because at least in one school of yoga, Vinyasa Yoga, all the asanas are strictly coupled with breathing, and the breathing is Ujjayi. So it's Ujjayi that they do while doing the different practices in Vinyasa Yoga. In Vinyasa Yoga, one posture flows into another continuously, as in Surya Namaskar. The entire practice flows uh, from one asana to the other, as in Surya Namaskar, and it's synchronized with breathing, and the type of breathing that is recommended in Vinyasa Yoga is Ujjayi. Now, Ujjayi literally means victory. So it's called the victorious breath or the breath of victory. And again, it should be ideally done under proper guidance. That's why we have not been doing it. But what it essentially means is that we produce a sound which is the result of partial contraction of the throat. That is what produces a sound, ah sound. And to go in steps from the simplest to the more difficult ones, or the way it should be proper Ujjayi is done, what we do is first we start with the mouth open and just inhale and exhale with the mouth open. The jaw drops. If you relax the mouth, the jaw drops, the mouth is slightly open, inhale and exhale. And then what one does is, while exhaling, one contracts the throat a little so that one produces sound. So, you'll find that sound comes. Then what we do is, we start producing the sound both during inhalation and exhalation. So the throat is continuously contracted, partially, not fully, partially. Then what one does is, one does the same thing with the mouth closed and breathing in through the nose. Breathing in through the nose, keep the throat partially contracted both during inhalation and exhalation. So, and then one of course can do it as a simple pranayama, or one can do it synchronized with the practices as in Surya Namaskar, or the entire set of practices as is done in Vinyasa Yoga. So that is what Ujjayi is about. So far we have seen that pranayamas like Kapalabhati or Surya, Anulom, Vilom, they warm us up. And Kapalabhati certainly does not make us feel relaxed. Ujjayi makes us feel both relaxed and warm. So normally it's cooling and relaxation that go together, but here warmth and relaxation go together as in the warmth of love. So that is what Ujjayi does. It makes us feel both warm and relaxed. Now here is something which Sri Aurobindo said about these usual breathing practices which we call pranayama. The real energy of our being is lying asleep and inconscient in the depths of our vital system. A vital system, is basically the entire system energized by prana. That is our breathing as well as our life force, manifesting as life force, manifesting as breathing, and manifesting in the form of all autonomic functions. So the real energy, the full capacity of this is lying asleep in our vital system and is awakened by the practice of pranayama. Inconscient is matter, that is the body and the prana, vital system as a whole we can use for prana, whether it's for autonomic functions or breathing or the life force in general. For all these we can use the term vital. So the real energy of our being is lying asleep and inconscient in the depths of our vital system and is awakened by the practice of pranayama. So that initial trigger, that awakening which will lead it towards greater manifestation is provided by these breathing practices. Some of the suggested reading for this, in this primer on yoga, you will find pranayama described on pages 12 through 14 in the chapter on Hatha Yoga. In this one, Back to Health through Yoga, you will find it described in chapter 1, which is Yoga, the finest lifestyle ever devised, on these pages from 22 through 28. In the primer on yoga, you do not have a description of the practices, only some basic principles. In this one, you have a description also of a few pranayamas. And why in this it is not there? Because at the end of the book, there are detailed instructions about how to do them. And along with that goes a DVD, which is now available also on YouTube. In this one, you have actually the practices described a bit. And in the synthesis of yoga, actually prana and pranayama are scattered at many places, but some of the places where they are concentrated are in part 2, chapters 27 and 28, and in part 4, chapters 11 and 14. And in this book, Spiritual Wisdom in Small Doses, you have an essay on prana and another essay on pranayama. And this book is available for free download on the website yesspirituality.wordpress.com. This is Sri Aurobindo Ashram Delhi branch where I stay and work. The foundation day of this ashram is on the 12th of February, which is coming soon. And that day, although it's a Saturday, we will have a session as usual, but then it will be a special session which will celebrate the foundation of the ashram. And this year we have the special privilege of also having with us, although not seen in this picture, the tableau on Sri Aurobindo, which you might have seen in the Republic Day parade held in New Delhi. So that tableau has now come to the ashram and will be a permanent exhibit here, and we'll show you the picture of that tableau also on the 12th. Please feel free to send any questions or comments on this email address, sa150yes@gmail.com. Gratitude to the Mother and Sri Aurobindo for making this program possible, and thanks to all of you for being there to make the effort worthwhile.
Namaste, sir.
Namaste.
Sonika, namaste, sir. Sir, my question is why, like for any pranayam such as Anulom, Vilom, or even in Kapalabhati, we are suggested to begin by exhaling and thereby flushing the air out first. So this is one. Why is it necessary to exhale first? Second is in Anulom, Vilom, we are asked to start on a particular side. What is the significance of that?
It may be arbitrary, but after you have done it for some time, you feel it comes naturally. To start with breathing out, whether it's Anulom Vilom or whether it is Kapalabhati, in both it feels more natural to start with breathing out. The second question was why on the left side? Why particularly on the left side? Again, that may be arbitrary, but maybe we start with the side which is more relaxing, because left is relaxing as compared to the right. But again, these things may be arbitrary, and once they have been repeated again and again, and there is nothing logically against them, it becomes a convention, a harmless little convention.
So you basically start exhaling from the left and then you inhale from the left and do the practice, right? You start
Which
by
practice are
exhaling
you
from the
talking
left.
about? Which practice?
Anulom Vilom, sir. Anulom Vilom.
Yes, breathe out through the left, in through the left, then out through the right, because the change is coming after inhalation. So out and in through the left and then in. But the round is actually counted from the inhalation on the left side onwards. So the first exhalation is not counted amongst the rounds that we go through. So we start with breathing out through the left, but the round begins with breathing in through the left and ends with breathing out through the left. So when we end the practice with breathing out through the left, we have completed one full round by then.
Correct.
And if I may again reveal sort of the way I sometimes do it to maintain a count of the number of rounds done, breathe out through the left, ignore that. When you breathe in through the left, say in your mind 0.25. When you breathe out 0.5, breathe in through the right 0.75, breathe out through the left 1. So it goes on like this: 0.25, 0.5, 0.75, 1, 1.25, 1.5, 1.75, 2. You can go like that. Okay. So as a scientist, I thought you might appreciate that.
Thank you, sir. Okay.
So then you can time yourself: 6 rounds, 9 rounds, 12 rounds, depending upon how much time you have.
Thank you so much, sir.
Okay.
There are questions in the chat box. What should be the duration of inspiration and expiration during alternate nostril breathing? More specifically, can we do Sahaj Pranayama during alternate nostril breathing?
Yes, sir. Coming to the second question first, when you are maintaining a slow and steady pace, trying to have abdominal breathing, spending more time on breathing out than on breathing in, you are essentially doing Sahaj Pranayama. So that is Sahaj. We do it's gentle breathing without making any sounds. That is what you do also in Anulom Vilom. And the first question was
About the duration.
about the duration. Uh, we keep it sort of flexible deliberately to keep it simple. Just sort of leaving it to you to just have breathing out longer than breathing in, which is very easy to maintain because breathing in is active, breathing out is passive. So if you make it passive, automatically it also becomes longer. But in more advanced practices, yes, specific instructions are given about counting, and as you go to from simpler to more advanced ones, gradually the ratio keeps shifting. Breathing out continues to take longer time as compared to breathing in. So you may start with 2:3 or something like that, two breaths, two up to a count of 2 while breathing in and 3 while breathing out. And then it may become 1:3 to 1:4. So it can go on increasing. So the amount of time that you spend on relative time you spend on breathing out goes on getting prolonged the more advanced the practice becomes.
The next question is, what are the differences in the effect of Surabhyadan and Surya Anulom Vilaram Pranayama?
At least I don't know of any essential difference. It depends on what you feel like doing. So both are considered equivalent. But whatever makes you feel better while doing it, breathing in and out through the same nostril, which may be simpler to keep because you're continuously keeping one finger, one nostril blocked with a finger. If you feel like doing that, that is simpler. Or if you want that there should be at least some change between breathing in and out, then you can do the Bhedan type.
Is there any difference between Anulom Vilolam and Nadi Shuddhi Pranayam?
No essential difference.
What is the difference between Prana and Atma, as we say?
Atma or Atman is the divine essence of the soul, whereas Prana you can say is one of the manifestations of the divine, and if within the divine we consider the soul to be that spark, then it's a manifestation of the soul. It means soul is much more comprehensive than Prana.
Next question. Is it possible to take our breath in the form of pranayam throughout the day in place of normal breath?
Yes, that is a spillover effect expected, which means that gradually our breathing should become slower, deeper, and more abdominal. So we move from our present pattern of breathing towards the ideal pattern of breathing. That is the spillover effect of pranayamas, which will happen not only as a result of pranayamas, but also as a result of becoming more peaceful in general. Because when we are more peaceful, in any case, we breathe slower.
Namaskar, Dr. Shah. I couldn't get the answer clearly. The difference between prana and atma. Couldn't get that answer clearly.
Well, it may become more clear when we go to the spiritual worldview, which is coming in after a few sessions later. But all parts of the being are a manifestation of the divine. But then the divine itself is also within us, just as it is around us. The presence of the divine within each individual is what we call the soul. And therefore, if we consider sort of the prana to be one of the manifestations of the divine within the individual, then we can say that the prana is a manifestation of the soul, because the soul is that representative of the divine within each individual. And whether we call prana to be a manifestation of the soul or manifestation of the divine, they would be pretty much saying the same thing. But prana alone, as one of those modes of manifestation, cannot be the whole of the soul or the whole of the divine. It's one of the modes of manifestation. So it's a more restricted, you can say, manifestation as compared to the individual as a whole, which includes the body and the mind. The body and the mind are other manifestations. The body being the most gross, prana subtle as compared to the body, and the mind even more subtle than the prana.
The last question, if any nostril is blocked, should we continue doing pranayam?
Firstly, I mean, if one has a severe cold and the nose is congested, one should not do Anulom Vilom. These and even other pranayamas can be avoided. Not only other, particularly Kapalabhati, because then Kapalabhati would drive the infection from the nose to the sinuses, and that can lead to sinusitis. So in general, one should avoid doing them when the nostrils are blocked. But if it's only a little blocked, then there are ways of relieving the block a little before one does the pranayama. And one of the ways is to exert pressure on one side of the chest. You might have seen that when you have a cold, it's easier to lie down on one side than the other. Suppose your right nostril is blocked and you lie down on the left side, then you find that the right nostril opens up a bit. So if the left nostril is blocked, you apply some steady pressure on the right side of the chest, and you find that that may open up the nostril a bit. But I mean, the essential thing is, what we have to remember is that we being not a very technique intensive sort of a school, we don't lay too much emphasis on the necessity of doing every practice religiously every day. If someday you have a problem, you give up that practice. By doing a few practices less, there will be nothing of great value that you will lose. So that is the way we look at it. Because yoga is so much, I mean, it's all life is yoga. All life is giving you that opportunity. And inability to do a few techniques, a few days, once in a while, is not going to make any essential difference to your spiritual progress, which is what yoga is for. So that's the way we look at it.
Meanwhile, there are just two questions which have come up. One, since prana is doing all the work, is it a manifestation of Shakti?
Yes, all manifestation in a way is a manifestation of Shakti, because if you believe in that type of a dualist way of looking at it as Purusha and Prakriti, then Purusha is the one which gives the sanction. It is the Prakriti which is manifesting as everything.
And next is, while sitting on the floor, is it necessary to keep our spine straight, as we can't keep the spine straight for a long time?
Well, it's a question of practice. In general, whenever we sit, we should sit with the back erect. And the feeling that we feel more relaxed when the back is crouched like this is illusory. In fact, in terms of physics, you'll find that the minimum pressure on the spine is when you are sitting erect. However, staying erect for very long periods can become tiresome, and there are two ways one can deal with it. One is sit erect but not tense. There's a difference between being erect and tense. You can be erect but relaxed. As we saw that in all postures, when you reach a certain posture, it's a position of intense stretch, but you can make it effortless. Pratna shathilya, you can relax the effort. In the same way, sitting erect can also become effortless. So you can even make a voluntary effort to relax your back, and you'll find that it will be possible to still stay erect. So you can be erect but relaxed, not tense. So that is one thing which will make it possible to sit erect longer. Second is, still there will be a limit. There's no harm in taking a back support for some time intermittently, which means that when you find that in spite of being relaxed, you find it tiresome to sit straight, the solution is not to crouch forwards. The solution is to take a back support. And what type of back support? The ideal back support is the one in which the curves of your back fit into the back support that you have. Now, if you look at the back carefully, you'll find that in the lower back, lumbar region as it's called, there's a hollow at the back. Whereas behind the chest, the thoracic part of the spine, there is a convexity, it is bulging out. So the support that you have should have a concavity, that is a hollow space where your chest will fit, and a bulging part where your lower back will fit. So if the two are complementary, you'll get a good back support. So it should be a firm, not hard, not soft, firm support which fits into the curve of the spine itself. And if you still want more, the way they do in car seats, they try to make good ergonomically designed car seats are made like that, so that your lumbar hollow and the chest will fit into the appropriate curves. But they also have a head support. So if you want further, even on your chair you can also have a head support, and on good ergonomically designed chairs there is a head support, and that head support should fit not in the neck but on this part of the head that is higher than the neck. That is where the head support fits best. That gives you best head support. So the ideal solution when you are tired is not to crouch forwards, but in spite of being relaxed, if you feel tired, take a good back support.
That will be all for today. Tomorrow we will have the practical day 5 and we end with the meditation music. Thank you everyone.
Thank you.